Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump has announced that National Guard trooper Sarah Beckstorm has died after a shooting near the White House. He has said that the second soldier remains in critical condition and is fighting for his life. US President Donald Trump says the United States will very soon begin action on land to stop suspected Venezuelan drug traffickers. They will soon expand operations beyond maritime strikes amid rising tensions and increased US military deployments in the region. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy says that Kyiv holds daily consultations with international partners to counter Russia's war. He adds Ukrainian and US delegations will meet again to advance frameworks for peace and security guarantees. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will not join French President Emmanuel Macron on his upcoming three-day visit to China next week, marking a break from recent EU-China diplomatic tradition, as Macron will hold bilateral talks alone with Xi on the future of EU-China relations and will later brief EU partners on the outcome. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei criticizes the Trump administration, calling it unworthy of contact for cooperation with Tehran. He has also denied rumors that Iran had sent messages to Washington. Peru's Supreme Court sentenced former President Pedro Castillo to 5 months in prison for attempting to dissolve Congress in 2022. Castillo was acquitted of some charges but faces rebellion conviction. The death toll from the high-rise apartment complex fire in Hong Kong has now risen to 94 people, with 76 injured, as rescuers launched full-scale operations across 7 burned buildings, as early investigations indicated the use of non-compliant, highly flammable materials. Rescue officials say floods and landslides on Indonesia's Sumatra Island have killed 84 people. Authorities report torrential rains triggered mudslides that swept through communities in North and West Sumatra, with search teams still deployed. Now we start with US President Donald Trump has announced that Sarah Beckstorm, one of 2 National Guard troops who were shot near the White House a day earlier, she has passed away. The other soldier is said to be in critical condition, fighting for his life. Trump, hailing Beckstorm as a highly respected young, magnificent person, said that he had learned of her death just before a video call with US troops to mark the Thanksgiving holiday. The incident has shocked the nation, with investigations underway into the circumstances surrounding the shooting.
I must unfortunately tell you that just seconds before I went on, right now, I heard that Sarah Beckstrom of West Virginia, one of the guardsmen that we're talking about, highly respected, young, magnificent person, started service in June of 2023, outstanding in every way. She's just passed away. She's no longer with us. She's looking down at us right now. Her parents are with her. This just happened. She was savagely attacked. She's dead. She's now with us. Incredible person. Outstanding in every single way, in every department. Just horrible.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Collins Chong-Yu Keat. He's a Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst at University of Malaya from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much, Mr. Collins, for joining us again. Good to see you. Thank you. Now, looking at this, it seems like U.S. will be starting to looking in their own soil for terrorism or terrorists, not elsewhere, not in Middle East, not in Iraq, not in Asia. How did you analyze this situation now?
Well, a direct attack on U.S. uniformed personnel requires an uncompromising response. That's what Trump has stated. When National Guard members shot near the White House, then the government cannot treat it as a routine crime. So the response signals the attack on U.S. security forces, especially in the capital, will trigger immediate structural changes. And of course, also Trump has blamed the previous administration and the Biden administration, where this influx of immigrants from external countries has jeopardized national security. And Trump is right to act immediately. So when your capital is attacked, hesitation is not an option. And of course, also this is about preventing the next attack. It's not reacting to the last one. And I think Trump's message is simple here. If you attack U.S. personnel, Washington will tighten every entry corridor that you have used, and this restores public confidence that national security comes before the notion of political correctness. So Trump has very much, maintained his stance that, he is there for the American people. He is there for the American safety and security. So nothing else comes, before that. And his priorities will always to bolster, to enhance, to amplify the readiness, and of course, peace through strength approach, whether abroad or at home, and that this measure will be in place to ensure that the safety of the American people will always be safeguarded before anything else.
Yes, indeed. And how might this death of a National Guard member near the White House, how do you think this will influence public debates on domestic security?
Definitely, we have seen how this has also created this new public dilemma of balancing the need for individual liberty and of course the norms of the American society, as opposed to the need also to restore order, to prevent conflicts or attacks from happening, and to ensure that the safety and security of the American people will be at the core priority of every administration. So what Trump is doing now is to drill down the message that his administration will always put the American people's lives first, and that his tough approach to the safety of the American people and his tough approach on immigration, on border control, on the vetting of immigrants will always be his number one priority. And this attack has further emboldened this approach, and that although he has opened up new debates on public confidence, on the need of political correctness, on the need to safeguard the rights of the immigrants, I think that in the sentiments on the ground and the overwhelming push or intent of the American people to see that whichever side that you are from, the priority has always been to ensure that the safety and the security of the country and of the people will always be the core priority. I think this is what Trump has been doing now, and that his supporters and the party has been fully behind him, and that I will argue that this will see more measures in place, in terms of vetting, in terms of border control, in terms of tighter vetting measurements and controls in the months and years to come, and that this is what the American people wanted to see in the first place.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for highlighting that. Mr. Collins, please stay with us as we come back to you for our Now we stay in this topic. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a sweeping set of immigration proposals in a social media post, vying to permanently pause migration from all third world countries and launch what he described as reverse migration to restore order in the United States. Trump has also stated that he would end all federal benefits for non-citizens, denaturalize migrants who undermine domestic tranquility, and deport any foreign national considered a public charge, security risk, or non-compatible with Western civilization. He has argued that only reverse migration could resolve what he called illegal and disruptive population growth in the U.S. This comes after the killing of 2 National Guards by an Afghan national near the Farragut West Station in the Northwest Quadrant in Washington, D.C. Experts suggest that such a move will have huge global implications and affect millions who shift to the U.S. for jobs, education, and also to escape persecution in their countries. Now we welcome back Mr. Collins Chong-Yu-Keat. He's a Foreign Affairs Security and Strategy Analyst at University of Malaya, Kuala Lumpur. Now, looking at this, as you did mention that, this kind of is what MAGA supporters, especially in U.S. politics, are welcoming. How do you think this will be affecting global and diplomatic consequences if U.S. significantly restricted immigration now?
This has always been in place even before this incident. We have seen the other global leaders have been well aware of the approach of Trump and how his peace through strength, America First approach has always prioritized the needs and interests and the demands of securing the country and the people. So even in the case of Europe, Trump is right to point out the impact, the repercussions of uncontrolled migration, the influx of unvetted people, the impact on the local societies in Europe, in individual countries, in terms of safety, in terms of security, in terms of long-term, direct impact on the needs of national security and national interests have been profound. So this is not an isolated incident to incur a much more greater global debate on that. I think that debate has been settled since years, even during his first term. So in the case of these anti-narcotics operations in Venezuela, also we've seen how there's a profound need also to secure the southern border, and that this is an issue that is not only affecting the lives of the American people, it's also affecting the lives of the neighboring countries in Latin America, in Brazil, in Argentina. So the move also to target, in terms of land-based targeting, is also a right intended, move to ensure that these smuggling operatives, because they are evolving. They are not only operating, based from the sea, but of course they are adapting, shifting from sea to land corridors. So if the U.S. doesn't follow suit, cartels will exploit this gap and will exploit this blind spot, and this will also, of course, have this, chain impact on the countries in Latin America. So what Trump has been doing now is basically to send a very strong message that strength deters any intent to have these threats to the American people, and that ultimately you cannot have this criminalized structure to operate freely in the Western Hemisphere. That has a strategic red line, and Trump's escalation follows the logic of deterrence, to act before the network expands, not after, and to act as to have these buffer zones and preventative actions before any future attacks were to happen. So I think what Trump has been doing is largely supported by not only his supporters, but by the common sense, awareness of the broader American people as a whole.
But I 100% agree with you that this debate has been started years ago. But linking a single violent incident towards the National Guard, of course, by a foreigner who was supposedly an ally from Afghanistan, but how do you think this will affect public discourse in policymaking and the treatment of immigrant communities? Because we know that in US a lot of gun violence is not from the immigrants but from white people. Indeed, especially school shooting. Even Charlie Kirk this year has been assassinated, and the person who has been detained was a white person.
Well, we have seen, of course, also the concerns being raised, in terms of statistics, in terms of the real situation on the ground. Of course, Trump knows better in terms of how he has impacted the concerns and wariness of the local people. And of course, to review these green card holders from selected countries is not, it's basically a targeted risk management. It's a preventive action. It's not a blanket punishment. And this is what, generally the American people, what they have wanted all the while, but, they have been constrained, they have been hampered by, woke policies or liberal policies that are very much, aligned with this notion of political correctness. So Trump is here to say that the era of political correctness is now over. It stops with him. The buck stops with him, and that he's simply portraying and doing actions that what the American people have always wanted the governments to do, which is to ensure the safety and security of the American people at large, and that to do common sense, to have these common sense policies to prevent things from happening and to ensure that risks are controlled. And of course, the interests of the country and of the American people are always prioritized. So this is what the American people wanted, and what Trump has delivered. And it's a simple common sense policy by him. And I think largely the American people, and not only from his party, but especially from the ones who have been staying in cities that have been ravaged by all these crimes and these safety concerns along the southern border. And of course, largely also in cities which are Democrat controlled, in terms of, like, I can see Chicago and LA and New York, these concerns have been raised now. So what I think that what Trump has been doing has been, very much, a Trump policy, as we can all expect, and this, I think, what the American people wanted in the first place.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Collins, Professor Collins, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, staying in the region, U.S. President Donald Trump has said that the U.S. will very soon start taking action to stop suspected Venezuelan drug traffickers on land. The Trump administration has been weighing Venezuela-related options to combat what he has portrayed it as President Nicolas Maduro's role in supplying illegal drugs that have killed Americans. U.S. forces in the region so far have focused on counter-narcotics operations, even though the assembled firepower far outweighs anything needed for them. U.S. troops have carried out at least 21 strikes on alleged drug boats on the Caribbean and Pacific since September, killing at least 83 people. Let's listen into what President Trump has shared.
And in recent weeks, you've been working to deter Venezuelan drug traffickers, of which there are many. Of course, there aren't too many coming in by sea anymore, you probably noticed that. From sending their poisons into the United States, where they kill hundreds of thousands of people a year. But we're going to take care of that situation. We're already doing a lot. We've almost stopped. It's about 85% stopped by sea. You probably noticed that. People aren't wanting to be delivering by sea. And we'll be starting to stop them by land also. The land is easier, but that's going to start very soon. We warn them, stop sending poison to our country.
Now, meanwhile, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has claimed that his country has been subjected to 17 weeks of psychological warfare by the United States during an event in which he calls on the armed forces to remain unperturbed in the face of military deployment ordered by U.S. President Donald Trump's administration on the Caribbean. Let's listen into what President Maduro has shared.
Desde hace 17 semanas, fuerzas extranjeras imperialistas amenazan continuamente con alterar la paz del Mar Caribe, de Sudamérica y de Venezuela. 17 semanas de guerra psicológica, presiones inmorales, que lejos de atemorizar a nuestro pueblo, han despertado una fuerza fabulosa de resistencia, de conciencia nacional.
Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Collins Chung-Yu Keat. He's a Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst, joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, do you think that U.S. is again, or Trump in particular, is again outsourcing the problem or blaming other countries, in this case Venezuela? Don't you think if U.S. decides to educate their own public of the harms of drug use, this could be combated?
Well, clearly it has not been working. We have seen that before under the Biden administration, and before that, of course, it has not been working. The problem still continues. The root cause of the problem has not been tackled. The cartels simply adapt from the seas to the lands corridors. So, of course, if Trump doesn't move fast, they will continue to exploit the blind spots. So we have seen how this maritime operations, they only catch shipments of the products, and land operations, meanwhile, they disrupt the production, staging sites, in terms of supply chain and cartel-linked militias and all that. So they inflict deeper strategic, damage on the cartel. So, and of course, there have been accusations that all these activities have also been, being ignored by the administration. So, and of course, the U.S. cannot allow these narco states to operate with impunity in the Western Hemisphere. So if this is tolerated, of course, other regimes could also replicate this notion. And Trump is simply enforcing the Monroe Doctrine logic to a certain extent, that no hostile or criminal state structures can exist near U.S. borders, and this will need to be tackled from the beginning. And if this is not addressed well, then the suffering of the American people will continue in terms of deaths daily of these drugs and fentanyl being smuggled in. So this is only yet another a Trumpian classic approach of protecting the safety and security and interests of the American people first, and to do things that have not been done before, which might not be popular, which might not be politically correct, but which have to be done in order to safeguard the lives of the American people and, of course, the safety and security of the region as a whole. So, and people are with him in this aspect, and people are highly supporting his measures because they are well aware of what previous administrations have failed to do in the name and the banner of political correctness and liberty and of course the rights and norms of conventional approaches, but not with Trump. His approach has of course also been dealt with tough measures and deterrent measures, and this is what I think the American people wanted from the very beginning.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Professor Collins for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Europe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced that Ukrainian and U.S. delegations will meet this week to discuss a formula for peace and security guarantees for Kyiv based on talks held in Geneva. In his nightly video address, Zelensky has said that there will be additional discussions next week, including more dialogue with himself. However, he did not provide specific details about the formula or the outcomes of these talks. The announcement comes as both countries look to strengthen their efforts to address the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Let's listen in.
Команда разом з американськими представниками вже на цьому тижні, наприкінці тижня, продовжить наближати пункти, які є у нас за результатами Женеви, до такої форми, яка виведе на дорогу до миру і гарантій безпеки. Буде зустріч делегацій. Українська делегація буде добре підготовлена та налаштована на предметну роботу. Сьогодні відбулася важлива зустріч санкційних координаторів європейських держав. І якщо Путін не хоче зупинятись, санкції не будуть зупинятись. Пріоритети зрозумілі – бити по російській нафті, по російській технологічній складовій, по їхнім фінансам, по їхнім активам, які працюють на російську воєнну машину. Світ нам допомагатиме. Я дякую кожному, хто тисне зараз на агресора, хто захищає Україну від тиску. Ми це дуже цінуємо і бачимо кожне таке. Наступного тижня будуть важливі перемовини не тільки у нашої делегації, а й у мене. І ми готуємо твердий ґрунт для таких перемовин. Україна стоятиме на ногах міцно. Завжди стоятиме. Я дякую всім, хто нам допомагає. Я дякую кожному, хто захищає Україну як себе особисто. Слава Україні!
Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Vasilin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Geneva Global Law School. Joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how do you analyze the alignment of priority or alignment towards ending the war in Ukraine between Ukraine and United States?
Yes, we hear the statement by President Zelensky. And he's very cooperative here with the United States proposal. Obviously, there are points in that list that are not acceptable, and President Zelensky made that clear. Mostly those that limit the sovereignty of Ukraine. Interestingly, the first proposal talks about sovereignty of Ukraine, but then there is a proposal to limit the size of its army, to give up territory, to commit of not joining international organizations such as European Union and NATO, and obviously no country in the world, not only Ukraine. Give me one country in the world which will accept conditions such as limitation of the size of the army, such as not joining an international organization, such as giving up territory. No single country in the world. So why Ukraine should give up territory, size of army, and participation in international organization? Absolute nonsense. And for that matter, obviously, the points need to be redrafted, and they are redrafted with the participation of European partners. And hopefully, let's see the next stage in this process to where does it go? What will be the next? We don't know yet. We will see in the next days how the negotiation will continue. But there is a lot of diplomatic efforts on the draft proposal by the American administration. Somehow it was made quickly in the same way that the same people, Witkoff and Kushner, did the Middle East proposal between Israel and Palestine, with points and trying the two parties to agree on all the points by redrafting some of them. It was agreed in Gaza, but not between Russia and Ukraine so far. So it doesn't mean that every proposal will work, but obviously diplomacy is important to keep clarifying the positions of the states, to find out what dynamics can exist there. So I'm generally supportive of diplomacy, but cautious that not every diplomacy brings results. And here, unfortunately, we don't have much results because Russia continues to demand the unacceptable. Basically, Vladimir Putin is saying that if Ukraine doesn't give up those regions in Donbass, we will continue fighting for them. And that's not a point to discuss. You cannot ask anything. Any country can say, give me half of your territory, otherwise I will fight for that. It's absolutely unacceptable. It's very clear here. International law is absolutely clear that you cannot do that. What Russia does cannot be done. It's illegal. And it needs to be made clear to Russia.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for emphasizing that. And yes, 100% that, you know, it's very difficult for them to achieve peace right now. But this diplomacy, a little opening of this diplomacy is helping. Do you think that, you know, what do you think is U.S.'s motive in pushing for peace between Ukraine and Russia right now?
Well, United States is Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants to make noise. He wants to be seen in the global media. He wants to be on the first page of all newspapers. And for him, this is what he does. He wants to be the peacemaker of the century, you know, to get a Nobel Peace Prize. But it doesn't work that way, and that's why he's wrong. You cannot do what he does and become a peacemaker, because he's not. He pretends to be, and he wants to be seen as such. And sometimes some leaders accept that. For example, Azerbaijan and Armenia, when they made a deal, and he was present at the deal, and both sides, Armenians and Azeri, acknowledged Donald Trump as a peacemaker, but that's not always the case. And in the situation of Russia-Ukraine, obviously his standing is incorrect. He assumed this is a business transaction. It is like buyer and a seller. They have to agree on a price. And it's not about that, obviously. It doesn't work this way. It's not a real estate transaction. It is a conflict between an aggressor and a victim. And all the conflicts between aggressor and victim end only in one way, when the aggressor goes home and the victim is compensated accordingly. And in his methodology, those do not exist. He doesn't blame Vladimir Putin for war crimes, for example. He doesn't demand a tribunal for those war crimes to be prosecuted. And without doing that, it remains incompetent and impotent diplomacy, unfortunately. It's a diplomacy, but it doesn't mean every diplomacy, as I said earlier, brings results.
Yes, with that, I would like to thank Professor Popovsky for always joining us and sharing that insight on this news. Now we move on to Central America. Peru's judiciary has sentenced former President Pedro Castillo to 11.5 years in prison. The verdict was issued on Thursday and relates to charges of rebellion and conspiracy from late 2022. Let's listen in to Norma Carbajal, Peru's Supreme Court Justice, what she has shared.
condenar a José Pedro Castillo Terrones como coautor del delito contra los poderes del Estado y el orden constitucional en la modalidad de conspiración para una rebelión previsto en el artículo 349 del Código Penal en agravio del Estado, y como tal se le impone al sentenciado 11 años, 5 meses y 15 días de pena privativa de libertad de carácter efectivo, que descontada la carcelería que viene sufriendo en mérito a su detención desde el 7 de diciembre de 2022, vencerá el 21 de mayo del 2034.
Castillo has attempted to dissolve Congress and assume expanded powers, but the move failed and he was removed from office in December 2022. He had been detained throughout the trial as the case progressed. The attempted power shift set off weeks of unrest. Protests erupted across the country against the new government and resulted in dozens of deaths, mostly in the regions where Castillo enjoyed stronger support. Last week, during his final defense statement, Castillo dismissed the charges against him. He has argued that his attempt to dissolve the Congress did not have the backing of security forces and his announcement had no practical impact. Now we move on to Asia. According to reports, Sri Lanka shuts government offices and schools as floods and landslides claimed 56 people's lives and damaged over 600 homes. Heavy rains since last week worsened and have resulted in flooding homes, fields and roads and triggering landslides in central mountainous regions of Badilla. Rivers and reservoirs overflow, blocking roads, halting trains and forcing authorities to close key routes. Air Force, Navy and police are working to rescue stranded residents. The floods comes amid reports of a cyclonic storm called Ditwa forming over the Bay of Bengal. Now we move on to Tahiti. According to authorities, a massive landslide buried 2 homes in the eastern village of Afahiti on the French Pacific island of Tahiti, killing 8 people, including a 3-year-old girl. Local prosecutor Celine Bellacourt reported that the victims include 3 women and 4 men, with all previously missing now confirmed dead. French President Emmanuel Macron has extended the nation's full support to the families affected. Rescue operations have suspended temporarily after a second landslide nearly endangered the rescue teams.